Hey, what's up? This is just going to be a short little follow-up video from the El Paso Manifesto that I read a few days ago. There was some things I kind of just thought of, and maybe I'll be doing this more if I do a longer video like that. I'll come back a little later and just add something because there's a lot of material that I think I left out while talking about that, and then when it's an ongoing situation like this, other things come up that I think are of interest. So I'll get right into it. I'm going to be talking to you guys about a tweet by Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I'm going to also just be saying just something going with the conspiracies that just seems a bit odd to me. But I'll start with this. I had mentioned something in that video about the automation, about how people are freaking out about automation. And something specific, the guy was talking about, oh, his dream job is probably going to get automated by the time he can actually have that job. And I was just talking about in general how truck drivers are normally the ones who that's discussed about happening the most to. That's a very common one that comes up in when people are talking about this, especially people more on the political right, in the conservative circles and things like that, of which I take in a lot of content. I hear that being brought up quite often. Oh, the truck drivers, what's going to happen with all the truck drivers? First of all, I don't really think they understand what the percent of the truck drivers in the actual country are. How many do you think they actually would be? I haven't looked, but just how many off head? What percent of the workforce, or how many actual numbers? Do you think it's 100,000? Do you think it's 250,000? Do you think it's a million? Probably not going to say a million because the country is like 350 million people. That would be a massive percentage of it. But yeah, 250,000, 100,000, 50,000. How many actual long haul truckers are there? So I was talking about how the highway system itself was built for the military, for moving ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. But that seemed kind of odd. And with the whole premise of this, one of my main premises in that thing was, how do people why do people just say things, just regurgitate things without making an actual connection? Do they understand the actual reason the thing was built? Even if the thing itself is an issue. Even if we can agree that the thing is an issue, in this situation, the highway system, in my opinion, being run by the state, doesn't really create the best road transport system that you could have just by virtue of what the state is. It has a course of force, it taxes money, it's not really dealing with the market, it has abilities to maintain things even if they aren't actually profitable and being used to their actual maximum. Whereas if you had something more in the private industry, something better, a competing product would come in and be like, hey, we're actually doing this better. But when you have that monopoly and the state is the ultimate monopoly, whatever product it's giving you may have started off as being the best one, but eventually it'll kind of erode and go away. So I was thinking, like, we know that's an issue. So if we don't really understand the cause of it correctly, we could kind of have a problem with defining the solution, a possible solution of how to go forward and things like that. But just in general, I'm into epistemology. How do we know things? How do you understand things? So I decided this is something I found out about a long time ago. Somebody told me about the ICBMs before I was really going more to like looking things up. Everything a question comes up in my head and look it up. So I decided let me actually go look online and find out what exactly is that true, because the ICBM thing sounded kind of odd. Would that mean they would have those big trucks that you see like in those Soviet kind of the Soviet military things, not the American militarized Fourth of July parade that had like two tanks that were brought to the country? Oh my God, the tanks are going to destroy all the bridges! The freak out over that thing was absurd. But anyway, back to the thing. I was thinking, why are they going to be moving those around? But then that didn't really make sense because I didn't think the Russians at that time had sufficient air coverage to actually be able to understand and know where the actual bases and things are and where the targeting systems close enough or good enough for them to actually pinpoint locations. And then most of these ICBMs, weren't they also in bunkers? So could you really penetrate the bunkers? So did you really need to move them around that much? So it seemed kind of odd just for the ICBMs to build the interstate system. And the interstate system is what we're talking about specifically here, is what I want to focus on. Because when I went online and looked, and I was like, okay, before 1940s, 1945, the Second World War was winding down around that time. There was an extensive road system in the United States of America, but it was mostly a state issue. It was down within the states. The states didn't really push too much of the interstate commerce. They didn't really have interstate roads that much. It might have been one or two major thoroughfares, but the whole like connected system in the entire nation, there was really no point to that because some places are just so sparsely populated. There was really no reason to have like a fully maintained road and invest in man hours and resources and time into actually building these roads. So what they were doing was when the military decided to, the U.S. government came in, I think it was under Eisenhower. He came in and he was like, we need to have this interstate system. Part of it was for just being able to get the whole war effort was going on. The entire country was mobilized as part of the war effort. And they saw this happening in Germany. They had the Landwaffe, which is like the Luftwaffe was the air war, Landwaffe was the land war, and that was dealing with supplies. And people might not understand this so much with military, but a big part of the military is the supplies. Even in the United States of America, the actual number of actual Americans that are in the United States of America, the cost per American, is ballooned because of the amount of people you need to actually supply these people, to get the fuel there, get the weapons there, get the vehicles there, get the actual medics and medicines and supplies and food and all these things that they need, get the electrical equipment, maintain all these things back in the United States of America with a connection, and then get the people at the bases, feed those people, train those people. So the war effort is massive, the actual resource. The resources are key with all these things. You cut off the resources, you cut off the supply lines, and you don't really have a war in most cases. You don't really have a war effort. So that was part of it. But one kind of cool thing I found out was that every 1 in 4 miles of the interstate system was built to be straight, so it could form as a impromptu runway. So if a plane could come and land down, if there was a problem with the airplane, it could land on the highway system. That's why you have these straight kind of places. Like they want to have every exit be at least a mile apart, and they ensure, like I said, 1 in every 4 miles have a straightaway. So that was just something that I learned with that. But I found out that yes, it came for that, came for moving supplies around the country. So it wasn't necessarily just the ICBMs. And majority of it was built once the soldiers came back to the United States of America. It was shovel-ready jobs. It was a situation to employ people. Well, that's another thing. When you have this kind of situation, how much is actual lost? The lost opportunities that these men could have been employed doing something else. They could have been doing back home, doing something else with their kids in their communities, maybe doing other things. But then they were like, "Oh, we have to employ these people somehow. Let's build this interstate highway system." So they did that. So that was part of it, and I was correct that the government was doing it. That was partially the reason for that, but I wasn't necessarily on point for the actual reason for it. Next part I'm going to talk about is the conspiracy theories that come up, of course, after these things. I'm not going to put up the images of the shooters in any of these cases. You can find them online. But one thing you can't find online, at least you couldn't find online immediately after, and I guess it's only a couple of days, but CNN has covered this. Places like Breitbart were covering this a lot earlier. Was something like, I think on Twitter, the Dayton, Ohio shooter, his account was taken down, and then it turns out he was a big supporter. He was an avid supporter. Came out and directly said that he was a supporter of people like Elizabeth Warren for president. He said he's a socialist. He's shown support for Antifa. So he's declared himself to be on the political left. He said he's not waiting for socialism. And this is a weird thing. He said a lot of things. A lot of things were discussed that he personally told other people, that people around him knew and heard. So this is not a situation where it happens and a lot of people come out and they say, "Oh my God, we didn't know. This is such a surprise." No, people knew. It's just they knew and it didn't actually come out. Because I think people talk about these things. This is literally mean figuratively. A lot of people like, he's literally Hitler. If you literally thought someone was Hitler, there's a reason. One of the main time travel questions is, if you could go back to the past and find Hitler as a kid, would you kill him? Because people understand, like, if you think someone is really that evil, that should be the person you should kill. So when it's literally Hitler, like as an adult, when people are thinking, "Oh, Trump is literally Hitler," I'm like, do you really believe that? Because would you be acting the way you're acting if you really believe that? So when he was saying things, supposedly he'd go to actual malls, bars, and be like, if I brought a bar in here, I'd be able to do this and do that and hurt this many people. And some people kind of moved away from him, but some people just said like, okay, well, we've seen this, but the reporting system wasn't there. And I think President Donald J. Trump is talking about the red flag laws or something, which is a kind of system where you can kind of report to someone if somebody has said threatening things, has said these odd kind of things, and then they won't be able to buy a weapon, or they'd be able to be in some kind of list where people can watch. A lot of people on the political right who are very pro Second Amendment, like this is a betrayal and things like that. But as usual, with a lot of these gun control measures that come out after attacks like this, I normally ask, how would that gun control, if it had been enacted, actually have prevented this situation from happening? Now, with the Dayton, Ohio guy, if he was clearly talking to people about actually going in and scoping, they said he'd actually go to bars to scope them out as a potential place for a shooting. Now, if somebody had reported him in, had maybe done just like a small voice recorder, maybe you just carry your phone, and the next time he has a conversation like that, you actually have a recorder and you record it like this guy. Then you put it into this hotline in this database. The next time the guy goes to buy a weapon, maybe he comes up and maybe he can still buy the weapon, but somebody watches him and they can kind of track him and things like that. I'm not necessarily against something like this. If I had a completely selective community where it's people I choose to live in, and I was like, this is kind of the laws for you to actually get a gun. If you're in this community talking about shooting people, we're actually going to find a way to actually have you in some database. I am okay with that, and to some extent. I think my main issue in this is who is deciding who is not mentally competent enough to be in that kind of situation, because this is the same government who is supposedly choosing who should be like school teachers and things like that, and you still have these occasional cases of school teachers molesting kids or abusing kids. So is the government really the person? Look at the politicians that actually get in power. Are these really the people you want deciding who is not mentally stable enough to get weapons? Is this the system that you want to actually be able to track and follow these people? Do you consider them competent enough to do this? Or is this a power grab on their part? So might be my main question. But the reason I was bringing this up is because there's conspiracy theories coming out. 2 photographs came out of this guy, and they were like, oh my God, it's not the same guy. This is kind of moving in, shuffling people out, because it looked like the Virgin. There's that little meme with the guy, like the Chad's walking around, he got a big crotch and things like that. And then like the Virgin, it's a guy kind of with his head down and glasses. And they showed pictures of the shooter at the Garlic Festival, which was recent in California. They showed the shooter from El Paso, and there was some kind of physical similarities with the glasses and the shorter hair and kind of just a downcast look, a little pale and things like that. And then they showed a photograph of the shooter from El Paso and I think the photo of him after he had been caught with the police. People were like, it's not the same photo. I was like, it's the same photograph. I'm going to put a picture of myself up on the screen right now, and you can see this. This is from a couple of months ago. Maybe a couple of months, month and a half or something. At that point, I'd been doing a ketogenic cycle for about 3 months. I was going on an average of about, what's it called? About 1,200 to 1,600 calories a day. I was working out just as much as I'm working out now. But it was a ketogenic, it was gluten-free, it was clean food, so nothing processed or anything like that. So my body was acting in a different way, and that was without facial hair. And you can see, like, I have facial hair now. You might not be able to tell. I can tell. I not even want to make videos, like recording my face, because I can tell. But I can tell my face already has a little more bloat, because when you have the ketogenic diet, you lose a lot of your hydration and you get kind of a more gaunt look and lower calories and things like that. My calories are up now, probably on at least a caloric maintenance. Sometimes I go over. But so that's the thing. And these small changes, that's even without my face, without even glasses. Because he has the glasses in one of the photographs they show of him, and he has those glasses that kind of make your eyes smaller, the opposite of magnify. And it's one thing I see, like, I have a thing for eyes. I find them very attractive. In an attractive trait in a female. And sometimes the girls have the glasses where it makes their eyes seem bigger, and like, oh my God, and then you take the glasses off and it's like, oh. But anyway, so it's the inverse of that, where his eyes were made smaller by the glasses in one of the pictures. And I'm talking about the amount of time between them. And then with some of the conspiracy theories, I'm like, why would somebody go to the trouble to put up fake pictures of these people? I guess if it's like they're saying, oh, this is a government plot for them to come in and actually do this thing, then they can get these laws in and they can control. They don't have to do this. There's enough crazy people out there to do these things occasionally. Now, it happened that there was 2, and I think there was a 3rd one that happened back to back to back. And if it's just a simple thing of having these things happen so they can talk them up, then they wouldn't get situations with Dayton guy, which is on the political left, so they can't necessarily pull that. They would also pull up every single issue would pretty much be discussed. Because the Garlic Festival shooter, there was a previous one in, in somewhere, I forget where the other one was. There's been other shootings in Walmarts that have come up. So there's just some certain mixes of things come together that happen to be politically expedient for people to take up, where I don't necessarily think you need a whole conspiracy theory for these things to actually happen. It gets to a situation where, as I mentioned in the first section I was talking about here, where unfortunately sometimes, or not the first section, but in this section, I was talking about this earlier, how some people just don't necessarily talk about things that happen. What are the systems set up to actually prevent some crazy person from coming out and doing this? How many of these people, what are we actually discussing? Are we discussing the issue? We know shooting is an issue, but if people are focusing more on just there's too many guns, is that really the issue? It's too many white men, is that really the issue? What are the issues here? We need to look at the actual issue. How does it come by? A lot of these people are from single-parent households. Why are single-parent households so prevalent in the United States of America versus in other countries that probably have less resources and things like that? Why are so many people medicated? The United States of America, the most medicated population we've ever had in our life. What is that doing? Talks of, actually it's another thing I need to look up, talks of them being actual, you can find in cities and things like that. If you go in the sewer water and the water that's actually in the system being driven around the city that comes from people's pipes and things like that, you actually find medicines in there, not just the fluoride to keep the water cold, but things like estrogen pills and things like that. Just because of people, so many people are taking medication. What is that actually affecting? How is that affecting the populace? How is it affecting the people? How is that affecting people's relations? So that's something to think about. You probably know where I'm leaning towards. A lot of these things are just state involvement in things, messing things up, kind of causes a lot of these situations. How many of these kids went to public school? I'm not saying most kids who go to public school, of course, the vast majority don't do this. But then how many of them get in a situation in school where we're supposed to, oh, this is where they socialize, where they become safer. But something in that environment, the way it is, gets them to hate people so much that they actually decide to go to those schools and shoot people up, target people in those situations, or go to their community. There's no really safety net. Or are you trying to say that if we didn't have kids in school, we had more families together, we had less kids getting in situations bad enough where somebody thinks we need to put actual medicine to change somebody's brain chemistry and things like that up? If we try to avoid those situations, won't you have a better situation? So anyway, this whole idea of having different people, like I told the guy, I saw this post and it was like, okay, I get it's a meme, but look, it's a difference. The guy's hair is a little longer. He's looking about a different angle. He had his glasses off. The skin's a little tanner. We don't know the time difference between the two pictures. I think his lips were kind of the same. The guy's like, oh, different nose. And I'm just like, look, you didn't address any of those other things. It could have changed. You could have had a tan. Like I said, it could just be a couple of years between the two photographs where he just looks a bit different. But to me, it looked the same. I don't know why people kind of go fish and look for these things. Okay, so the last one here is we're going to be talking about this tweet by Neil DeGrasse Tyson. Now, Neil deGrasse Tyson is, I think, the most famous astrophysicist right now. He's mentioned some political standpoints recently in the last couple of years that were more on the political left. That this tweet he posted kind of, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, like from Neil deGrasse Tyson, but then I actually read through it and was like, okay, yeah, it makes sense because he's a scientist. He's somebody following facts. But let me just read it to you and I'll give you some opinion, then we'll read some of the replies. And I think it's just kind of cool. Okay, this is from Neil deGrasse Tyson. In the past 48 hours, and he posted this on August 4th, so it was right after it happened. In the past 48 hours, the USA horrifically lost 34 people to mass shootings. On average, across any 48 hours, we also lose ... 500 to medical errors, 300 to the flu, 250 to suicide, 200 to car accidents, 40 to homicide via handgun. Often our emotions respond more to spectacle than to data. And then, after reading this, I just took in the spectacle of tons of people emotionally reacting to data. So it's kind of like, he's a scientist. He was like, this is science in action. Let me put a hypothesis out. Here it is. Let's test it. And just watch people freak out. Oh my God, oh, I can't believe you're doing this. And you see, that's why when I first kind of read it, I was like, oh, but isn't he on the political left? And I've also seen people on the political right posting this, like, yeah, look, he's supporting us. Yeah, I'm surprised from Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'm like, is there a reason to be surprised? Because if you read this, he has not made any political statement in this. He's not made a value judgment in one way or the other, besides first saying the USA horrifically lost 34 people to mass shootings. I've had people see this and say, oh, we're supposed to now forget about the shootings. He didn't say that anywhere here. He literally just said, look, horrifically, first of all, he's stated that the shooting itself, that's the only thing he's put a judgment, a mental thing. Everything else was just data. He's just literally listing out data. When he puts the data out, people react emotionally to the actual data there because the spectacle of the shootings, of the mass shootings, are a lot more visceral than the 500 medical errors because you don't see these. From the 300 of the flu, you don't see those. The 250 suicides, people say, okay, that's you killing yourself. So they don't really worry too much. I mean, it's not as stuck up in their minds as somebody coming up in a Walmart and shooting people. 40 homicides via handgun. Now, this is individual situations, like things that happen in Chicago and places like that, in the inner city of Chicago, where there's a website that tracks this. Talked about this in a previous video, where those kind of deaths don't really stick out as much. People don't really talk about that about gun violence in inner city areas and things like that as much as they do for these kind of terror attacks. And an analogy, I got into a conversation with one of my friends over this because they were thinking I was posting this, but I just said, look, he's actually talking about this. He even says, often our emotions respond more to spectacle than to data. And then people have their emotional response to it. Somebody said, yeah, so we're supposed to forget about everything else. I'm like, no, he didn't say that. That's not actually in there. It's kind of like saying, with the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in World War II, at the end of World War II, those two bombs, having the mushroom cloud, having those hundreds of thousands of lives be wiped out just in a second, having the radioactive effect after that and things like that. There's a great movie, Grave of the Fireflies, that I suggest you guys watch. And also talking about Grave of the Fireflies, it's another unrelated thing to show that some of these it's a related thing somehow. Some of these horrible things do occur in other places. But the reason the Walmart thing sticks out more than other people, because you're more familiar with Walmart. People go to Walmart, they have their emotional reaction to that. Americans are going to have more visceral reaction to that in a personal situation. But this happens in other countries. In Japan recently, there was Kyoto Animation. I think it was Kyoto Animation. Somebody came in, I think was with a gun. He said they stole some of his animation, his stories and things like that. It's a big animation studio, and he came in with a gun, he started shooting people, set the building on fire, a lot of people died. I think it was 11 people dead. I'm a big fan of animation. You can see some of my drawings in the back, you've seen some of my art on some of my channel and things like that. And one of the guys who was a principal animator for, I think, Grave of the Fireflies, which is a movie about post-World War II Japan. It's an amazing movie, one of my favorite movies that I've ever watched, super emotional. But that was a massive shooting, massive attack. Japan has very stringent gun laws. So when people are talking about it's the availability of guns, but these things still happen in other countries. Shootings have happened here in Kenya, mass shootings and things like that, because the evil people will go above and beyond regular measures to get weapons. Now, these people who did these shootings were evil, came to do evil things, and they found things illegally. They legally bought these guns. So there's ways to actually, I think, raise the barrier without infringing rights all the way. But okay, so back to the emotional thing. Keep going on these little divergence. It's an actual term that's escaping me right now. Okay, so back to this. So I was talking about with my friend, I said the bombing of Nagasaki, the bombing of Hiroshima, that killed fewer people than the constant firebombing of all Japanese cities. Part of the firebombing being so bad is the way Japanese build their buildings. A lot of their buildings have those mats. What are they called? I forget the actual term of the mats. There's a name of the bamboo mats where it gets to the point where they even measure apartments and things like that. It's still such a central part of their lexicon of where they build things that they will measure and say, okay, I'm getting it's not tamaki. It's something. There's some actual term for it. But they'll say these bamboo mats, they say I'm getting an apartment that's 3x4 bamboo mats because there's a standard shape measurement of them. So it's become part of that. And then they also have those traditional kind of sliding doors with the paper walls and things like this and things like that. So a lot of the building was built with wood and it was older times. So a lot of the firebombing did a lot more damage to the country, a lot more damage to the citizens, killed a lot more people. But the atomic bombs, the spectacle of those, still sticks out a lot more than a concerted firebombing. So it doesn't mean pointing out that more people were killed by firebombing doesn't lessen the horror and problem or the negative aspects of the two Hiroshima bombs. So let's just read a few of these. I'm going to kind of just go in here and read a few of these reactions. Let's just go with the first couple of ones. So for me, the spectacle of a once respected scientist now yields data. One less person willing to follow you because of your inability to understand the difference between murder, for the sake of inspiring terror and a car accident. Again, she's saying this, Miss Annie Gabson Howell, but did he say there's no difference between any of these? Or did he just simply say, first of all, he said the murder was horrific. He didn't say medical errors are a lot worse. 300 to the flu are a lot worse. He did say in 48 hours, the US lost 34 people to shootings. On average, across any 48 hours, we also lose 500 horrifically to medical errors, 300 unfortunately, avoidably to the flu, 250 unmercifully to the suicide. Now, if he was going there and putting his more like judgmental, value-based kind of opinions on everything else besides the 34 shootings, then I can understand why you're saying, okay, yeah, you're kind of saying this is worse. No, he said the shootings were horrific. Okay, this is a bad take. It's tone deaf and cold. No, it's just data. It's literally just data. People here are just posting different things. A good point, but I think it should also be considered that the emotional response has value and should not go ignored. Shootings are horrific and have an impact on us, disconnected from the individuals involved, unlike other causes of death, although all death is a tragedy. Okay, so, Sisuma Void here, that's kind of what I'm getting at, but you're kind of just repeating what he said. As he said, even use the word shootings are horrific, and I don't know if he's saying that himself because he's just defining it as horrific, or if he's saying it because he's calling back to what Neil deGrasse Tyson said, or if he's just kind of subliminally saying it because he read it. And I think a lot of people read it, and before even reading that last line that most people have an emotional reaction to data, in those cases to spectacle rather than data, I think most people went and actually negatively responded to this once they actually started reading the thing, and they kind of assumed he's making this kind of point, because here she just avoided that. So, and yet when you lose people, things like car accidents, we create new laws to make cars safer. So you can take your data and shove it into the cosmos. Come on, Neil, I expected better from you. First of all, Miss Rachel Winton, why should Neil deGrasse Tyson care what your expectations are of him? Like, don't put that on him. You don't know him. Maybe she knows him, but it doesn't seem like she knows him. But again, he hasn't said there shouldn't be laws after this. He hasn't discussed anything else. He didn't talk about any policy. He didn't say gun laws don't work. He didn't say we should have more guns. He didn't say we shouldn't put these laws in place. He just said, this is data. People have an emotional reaction to spectacle rather than they do data. That's all he said. Over here, she's talking about, oh, yeah, so he hasn't said anything. I genuinely love you, Neil, but I have to ask how someone so smart can say something this dumb. This is by Josh Gad. This is a celebrity. Okay, first of all, I really have an issue with people throwing out love so much. Josh Gad, why do you love him? Because he said some cool things. He has exposed us to some amazing things with the Cosmos series that he took over from Carl Sagan. He's done astrophysics, is an amazing field to me. He's taught me a lot of things about space and things like that that I didn't know about. And I'm sure he's opened that up to a lot of people. But that's not enough for me to love someone. I can care for someone, I can value their opinion on certain topics. But this whole love all around, when people throw around the term love this way, it kind of devalues what love is to me. And to me, it makes me question what they mean when they say anything else. Because when he gets somebody so smart can say something so dumb. Okay, Josh Gad, maybe he is really smart and what he said was not that dumb. If you truly think he is that smart, possibly, you're the one who didn't get what he said. Unless you think somebody who is that smart as I am, somebody who's up here with us in the smart people thing, can't believe would go as low and say what those stupid, dumb, Republican, conservative, retard, gun-loving, gun-toting, Trump-loving people would kind of say. That's kind of what I think he's getting at here. It's like, how dare you say that? He seriously just said data. He literally just said data. People freak out. Dawn Dark. In the past 48 hours, Neil deGrasse Tyson has beat off to himself in the bathroom mirror 5 times. Excuse me. Often he maintains eye contact and listens to audio of his own voice for the ultimate climax. Okay, yeah, so we're just going to go to insults. Yeah, nah. What are you supposed to do with that? What are you supposed to do this? End gerrymandering now. I would expect a better argument from a scientist. This is what we call a red herring false equivalence. These things don't negate the need to do something about gun violence. We can work on most of these things. It doesn't diminish that we keep having these attacks and do nothing. First of all, United States of America does not keep having those attacks. If you actually look at the actual number, I think more people have been killed by police shootings than have been killed by mass shootings. Now, depending on how mass shootings are actually defined. I saw this one situation. There was somebody some African American in Chicago or somewhere. He fired at four people, yelling, "I don't like white people in my hood." And then he turned himself in a few days later. Said the people fired at him first. So if he had just clipped all four of those people and nobody had actually died, it'd be considered a mass shooting. Because it's just like if four more people are shot at and injured, it's considered a mass shooting. So if you actually think about the actual number that happens, yes, like I'm saying, it's horrific. But the actual number that happens when somebody says, we keep having these attacks, I'm like, what do you mean, keep having? What's the number of keep having? And again, somebody's here is saying a better argument from a scientist. Neil deGrasse Tyson did not make an argument in this tweet. He literally just listed facts, data, and then made a statement that people emotionally react to spectacle rather than data. It wasn't really an argument. I don't really see the argument there. But again, people use words in wrong ways. People mean things literally figuratively. And it's... I don't know. I think I'm going to end up here. Is there anything else here? Welcome to doing super important scientists. Can be fun to look. Okay, here we go. Candace Easton. It's almost comforting that even a super important scientist can be so fundamentally stupid on some subjects. What did he say that was stupid? Candace, please tell me, since you are the one who can judge what people are fundamentally stupid on, you're the one who knows this. You might be the one who knows this wide range of topics and things. He literally just listed data. So, that's it. I'm going to leave a link below, I think. I might try and include maybe something about the roads, something about maybe a link to this tweet if you haven't seen the tweet before. What else did I talk about? No, I'm not going to leave a link to the guy's photograph. But anyway, so that's it. That's kind of the come up of this. What do you guys think of what's happened after? Because as usual, the politicians have come out and said different things. I want to read something. Remember the manifesto was started off saying the inconvenient truth. Said about me. The guy opens up and says, in general, I support the Christchurch shooter in the manifesto. This attack is a response to the Hispanic invasion of Texas. That's how he opens it up. I discuss the whole thing. And then towards the end here, he goes on and says, my ideology has not changed for several years. My opinions on automation, immigration, and the rest predate Trump and his campaign for president. I'm putting this here because some will blame the president or certain presidential candidates for the attack. This is not the case. I know the media will probably call me a white supremacist anyway and blame Trump's rhetoric. The media is infamous for fake news. Their reaction to this attack will likely just confirm that. Many people think that the fight for America is already lost. They couldn't be more wrong. This is just the beginning of the fight for America and Europe. I'm honored to head the fight to reclaim my country from destruction. So that's how he ended up his thing. So what's happened? You've seen different people in the media. If you just looked around, you've seen them blame Trump. You've seen politicians come out and blame Trump. It's a blunt rhetoric. Let's see what's going to happen now that the media, some places, I think CNN, people on the political right have already picked this up. You see CNN and things like that picking up and talking about how the Dayton shooter was on the left. Are they going to ask Senator Elizabeth Warren about this? Doubtful. I'll be very surprised if they do. I think that time there was that shooter who went to the baseball game and he was a Bernie supporter. I think Senator Bernie Sanders was asked about that a bit. But in this situation, he had mentioned he was actually with Antifa. There's ties with that. Are people on the political left going to be talked about this? Because if it is one way or the other, I think both sides have been talking about this, talking about the rhetoric. And most sides, in my opinion, more on the political left, when you call someone literally Hitler, like I said, Hitler is using that go back to the past thing and kill a baby. People consider killing a baby because of who Hitler is going to be as an adult. That's how evil he's supposedly supposed to be. So when you say somebody's literally Hitler, that invoking that kind of evil on somebody is a visceral thing that can get people to do some really hateful things. So if they're talking about the things Trump has said has made people do this, then how about the things you're said? How about when someone like Reza Aslan comes out and says, oh, we need to actually get out here. It's actually going to be a battle out here. So you have people on the political right that are talking about, oh, the civil war is coming. It's going to be this happening. This has been conversations happening. And I also ask the Americans out there, if you truly think there is something called the United States of America, in your definition, in your opinion of what it is, what are you doing to maintain that, to support that United States of America? What are you doing to have that thing continue or to get better? Are you having conversations with people so we can avoid getting to the point where it's fists, where it's battle, where it's people's lives being lost? What are you personally doing in your life? Are you talking to people? Are you sharing content that you find out there? Are you having these small, uncomfortable conversations with people? When somebody brings something up that you disagree with, do you find a comfortable way to kind of breach that topic and be like, how do you actually know that? Why do you think this about that? If that was the case, would you do this and this? Would that be this and this? Or, oh, you say this about someone, but I've met someone like that and they weren't like this. So how do you explain this person? So I think there's other steps and things like that to avoid some of this, because for some people, they take in that similar data that you have and they go do bad things. They go do evil things. So I think there's ways to have conversations to talk about things like this and avoid getting to that point. And I think epistemology helps. How do people know things? Because when somebody knows something, they can act on that. The more confident they are about something, the more they want to actually act on that thing. So don't just sit there and just believe things without being able to back up those beliefs. If you're unsure about why something is that certain way, somebody brings it up, put in the extra effort, make the actual time to actually go in and actually find it. Because, hey, next time somebody else might be unsure of something, you might be able to suggest they look at this resource, or you might be able to defend your position in a better way to get that person to either understand where you're coming from or understand where they're wrong about something. Or you might think somebody hates United States of America, hates this, the immigrants are coming because they want this from us, they're taking this away from us, the automation is taking us away because of this bad person doing this. And then you think, for me to stop that, I have to do this. And if you actually took the actual time, I think, to actually find out the info and back it up on your own, you would get to the situation where maybe that's not it. Then the people you have in your life, try to surround yourself with some people you can have these conversations where you can say, oh, by the way, I read this and I thought about this in this way. Is this right? And then somebody can give you a different kind of opinion on it. So yeah, that's it for this video. Like, share, and subscribe. Get me some merch on the screen now. I'm going to try to post some more videos coming up where I do like drawing the merchandise that I sell, different designs. Try to use some of my art, because I really like this kind of stuff, animation, things like that, into the videos and make it more interesting to watch visually if you're actually watching at this point. And to support the channel, I also think just like, share, and subscribe to my stuff. Comments below. I really like talking to people in the comments. From not actually posting for a while, I've been posting on social media, and I think I might have some conversations, some videos with just the conversations that I've had on other social media social media portals. But otherwise, one way you can support the channel is by going to the link below, merchandise store, buy some merch from there, and you can also have some cool designs to wear and just stuff. So yeah, like, share, and subscribe. That's it for the video. Goodbye.